It's not that deep. Everything love, lust, and life.
Sex. We talk about it so you can get better at it. We can all get better at it and maybe feel a bit happier in the process. It's not that deep. Or is it? Hi, welcome to this episode called Why You Shouldn't Sleep Together. I'm Fran and this is my husband Andy, who we've been married for 11 years, and my friend Rebecca. And me and Andy, we haven't slept together in the same bed for probably about 8 years now, isn't it?
Yeah, by the odd forced hotel stay. We haven't slept together at home in the same bed for a long time now. And it's the best thing we ever did.
Yeah, so just to clarify, this is physically in the same bed rather than sex. Yeah, for us, it started, 8 to 10 years ago now, where you were on shifts, weren't you?
Yeah, I used to do a lot of night shifts. Used to snore a lot back then. Just weren't compatible in terms of our schedules at first. That was the biggest problem. I would work night shifts and rotating onto day shifts with early starts. You worked typical sort of office hours, didn't you? Starting at sort of 8 o'clock to get out of bed, jump in the car quickly. But we just weren't compatible at all because you, obviously, a very light sleeper. I could sleep through an earthquake, and just led to a lot of problems, really, didn't it? Where we were clashing. You were getting frustrated with me, I was getting frustrated with you.
So tell me how you guys got into this in the first place, because it's obviously quite a big move for people to decide to sleep in separate beds.
It sort of was a necessity thing, mostly from you on being on shift and coming in and waking me up in the middle of the night or something. But then we realised actually that I'm quite an antisocial sleeper, so I don't want any mess. You know, I can't deal with noise, I can't deal with temperature change. Andy likes to be really warm, I like to be really cold. We like different things in the bedroom, like I like my bedroom really dark, he likes to have the curtains open. Literally everything would just lead to some sort of form of clash with us. And it just, once we removed that from the bedroom, it actually made our relationship better.
Yeah.
We both sleep better as a result of it. And we just don't have that kind of antagonism towards each other, just built out of the resentment from the fact that we weren't sleeping properly, and we just weren't clicking in that way. And just because we don't click in that way doesn't mean that we don't click in every other way. And it's only with hindsight that we've realised this.
Yeah. But
it's something I think that we want other people to get to without having to go through the sort of years that it took us to realise this, is that actually, you know, it doesn't have any bearing on the effect of your relationship. It doesn't mean that you don't work as a couple just because you don't work in the same bed.
Yeah. So was it unintentional sleeping in separate beds, and then
initially, yeah,
you found out how beneficial it was to the whole relationship in general?
Yeah. And it took a long time, didn't it, for us to realise how good it was.
Yeah, I think at first, thinking back, it sort of it was born out of resentment. So, you know, you'd be nudging me, or at 2 a.m, we'd have a borderline argument about it, and I'd just get up and stomp off to the spare room. And then at first, I think we started to just do that as a reaction to a clash or something like that, or resentment. But then as time grew on, I think we both realised and felt the benefit of it pretty quickly, that actually is a lot better, and it didn't start affecting our relationship or our intimacy or anything.
Quite the opposite, I think.
Yeah, it did help. It helped, it definitely.
But you're told by society that you should sleep in the same bed, and we've been on there's a couple of couples groups that we've seen where it's like, no, you absolutely shouldn't be sleeping in the spare room, and you should get off the sofa if you want to save your marriage. And we're actually the other way, like, no, you should actually embrace that.
Yeah,
that it's if you do it with purpose, then it's a lot more sense to the relationship. It just gives you a lot more freedom, I think, to be who you are and to create that space that is a complete sanctuary for you. And it's that personal space that in a relationship you don't realise that you need until you don't realise it's gone until you get it back.
Especially with people with children as well, there's that common phrase of being touched out and needing space away from physical contact all the time and things like that. So that makes a lot of sense to me.
It's kind of decompression time.
Yeah, absolutely. So what would you say to people who perhaps didn't have a spare room or were in like a hotel room setup? I mean, you guys have been in hotel room setups where you get twin beds, is that right?
We try to get twin beds, yeah.
And does that have a similar effect? Does that still work?
It's not quite as good as separate rooms if you we're just lucky in that sense. But it is definitely better.
It's definitely better, and look, we can still get through the odd night if ever we've needed to. Where
I can feel the tension though when you're asleep, when we're trying to sleep together in one bed. There's just tension. You're just laid there like rigid.
There is, and especially going back a few years when we were still trying to persevere with sleeping in the same bed, I'd be going to sleep tense. I'd be going to sleep with my subconscious firing because I was really acutely aware that I needed to stay still. I needed to not breathe. I needed to not move. Basically, all the things that render you as being alive, I tried to not do. Oh. And nobody's going to get a good night's sleep out of that because I'm going to have a poor quality of sleep. Therefore, that's then going to impact on you. And yeah, it just leads to, in the morning, neither of you feel well rested. And if you're not feeling well rested, and you're going to kind of blame each other for that, it's not going to benefit you in your relationship in any other way, especially, in terms of intimacy and sex. You're not going to want to engage with that person.
So let's get to that point then, the elephant in the room. How do you, I think a lot of couples will probably think, oh, we're going to bed together, we're going to have sex this time of night, etc., etc. How do you guys keep up a happy, healthy sexual relationship when you are sleeping in different rooms?
I think the thing to remember about sleeping in the same bed is that proximity doesn't always equal intimacy. So you're not always having quality time just because you're there. You're just having time. And I think the thing for us is that we just have to schedule, effectively, quality time with each other. And you purposely make that time for each other, and it makes it more special, and it makes it more intimate in many ways, I think. Yeah,
and you say scheduling it, there is that, but there is also a bit of spontaneity to it. We have got a little routine at bed where we'll both get ready for bed, say goodnight to each other, and, if there's a spark there or one person's feeling it, they'll put the feeler out and see if the other one isn't. More often than not, if that is the case, then we'll still have a good time, and it's definitely not affected our sex life. I'd absolutely say it's the opposite.
I think
it's improved it.
Yeah. Because, the key thing for a good sex life is having good sleep. And if you're optimizing your sleep so that you feel as good during the day, the chances of you wanting sex are a lot higher as well. It's one of the main things that really reduces people's desire, isn't it, is being tired. And so we just sort of cut that out a bit.
So you say you've still got this really nice bedtime routine. Do you think that maybe that even instills more intimacy than you had previous to that? Because if you think about sort of couples who don't necessarily have separate rooms or anything, they're just going to go to bed, go to sleep, not always have the good night sort of ritual. Do you think maybe that has introduced a state of intimacy?
Yeah,
before you
do
go
it with
to bed?
Purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it does.
Definitely does. I think that by doing that, it's a specific time and you're more focused on it. Whereas if we're just getting to the same bed, even if you're a couple that's really compatible in that sense, you could have had niggles through the day. You don't get that necessarily that bit of space or time. And I think that's the other really important thing to us is that both got our own space as well. So you can still have that bit of time to decompress. Or in the morning, a little bit of time to yourself. You're not having to think about someone else.
And I read before bed, and Andy doesn't. He falls asleep really quickly, and he used to fall asleep before I was ready to go to sleep, and then he'd be in that sort of snoring cycle before I was ready to go to sleep, and then I'm awake and listening to it, and they're like, "Well, I can't sleep through this."
Yeah.
And so it just didn't really work for us. But actually, now we've got our own space to do what we want to do, and then our own sort of setup as well. I think that's quite nice. Like it's a personal thing. It's me time, but it's every day.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. I think you lose that with kids a lot. You lose that me time. But we've sort of created a space that gives you me time every day.
And what kind of responses have you had from people that you've shared this with? Because obviously it is quite controversial. It is, like you said, people, we're told to all sleep together, and if you don't, then it's all bad and everything. But what kind of responses have you had?
I think you're right. The traditional response to it is that it's a failed or failing relationship if you're not sleeping in the same bed. And I've certainly seen that when we've spoken to friends and that and mentioned it.
You were quite keen not to mention it to start off with, weren't you, when we first started?
Yeah, because I suppose maybe I had, in some senses, and some of my values were quite traditional in the sense of, like you said, you live your life within a box. If you do this, you get married, you have a job, you sleep in the same bed. And I suppose as we've been together longer, we've just sort of set fire to that box, haven't we? We don't really conform to any of that. But definitely, at first, I didn't want to, because I didn't want people to interpret it that we had a problem, because I didn't feel like we had a problem. But I had concerns that people would view us, that it was weird and that we had an issue and we weren't able to deal with that. Now, I don't care. I'll tell anybody, as this podcast will obviously show. But I'm proud about it. I like the fact that we do it and it works for us.
But then I've told a friend and she was like, oh, yeah, no, I'm not compatible with my husband, but I know he won't let me sleep in a separate room. Maybe we should try separate beds. So it's nice to see that some people sort of think about it if they're really incompatible. So deal with it before it becomes a problem.
Yeah.
And yeah, the quality of sleep that we've had as a result of it is so much better. And we've put a real focus on that in the last year or so, haven't we?
Yeah, we've done a lot of work on our sleep individually in the last year or so. Just from a general sort of well-being perspective, we realised that we weren't probably in as good a place as we could be. And we learned that through working on our sleep a lot, it's definitely helped in many areas and just kind of reinforced our decision as well. I also think it's worth just mentioning that in terms of timescale, when we made that decision and first started to sleep in separate rooms, that was before we'd even got married slightly, wasn't it? It was probably in the year leading up to when we actually got married. So I think marriage is just it's a word, isn't it? It's just something that people do. It doesn't actually mean anything in a true sense of your relationship. But I think just for people listening, it might be interesting now. So it was probably 6 to 9 months before we got married is when we started sleeping in separate beds. And maybe for some people, I don't know whether it would have been for us, but if you'd done it after marriage, it would have maybe then felt like a failing of the marriage. You often hear about, sex lives take a downturn after marriage, and I suppose this could easily have fell into that, where people would see it as, oh, they've got married and now they don't sleep in the same bed.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, one of the you're saying about downturn of sex, we've had the opposite when we've started this sort of sleep coaching and learning how to be better at getting the optimal sleep, is that we've had a real upturn in sex as a result of it, both wanting it and our energy and the quality as well, and the sort of time. For instance, we used to think that sex was best in the evening, and I'd be really up for it in the evening, and you weren't so up for it in the evening because you were knackered. And yet now it's because we're well rested earlier on in the day, we're sort of ready to go when we've got the energy and the drive is there earlier. Yeah. And I think that's another one of those things that sort of with relationships is that by the time you get to sex, you've run out of energy for the day.
Yeah.
And I think that's quite often one of the reasons why couples sort of have less sex. Certainly was for us. And just getting to it earlier, basically, having more energy left at the end of the day helps.
I think it's a really good point there, highlighting respecting your own needs and figuring out what they are, in terms of, okay, I work better in the evening, or okay, I am a light sleeper, I need a dark room. Like, even just knowing those things about yourself, I think it's not necessarily something that people would automatically think about. And I think it's quite helpful to sort of sit there and have that conversation with yourself, and maybe even with your partner, and just out of interest, general interest. So let's take a look at what the science says about the benefits of sleeping separately, because there is actually quite a fair bit of research on this. Over 60% of us are sleeping together. So there's 40% who are singly sleeping, and by the looks of it, probably sleeping happier. So people do sleep worse with a partner. All of the stats said this, particularly if you sleep with somebody who snores. So you can blame them for up to 50% of your sleep disruptions. So Andy, I'm handing this to you, seeing as you're an expert snorer. Was that something that had always been the case with you, or did it come out of nowhere?
What, to start snoring?
Yeah.
I think it was probably, at the time, it was definitely due to health. A couple of years later, I did actually have a operation which to do something with my nose and straighten my septum up, which I don't really think did a great deal in the end, but other than cause a lot of pain.
Yeah.
Didn't really make any difference. But I think it's worth saying that a lot of it just comes down to your general health, and weight and things like that plays a big part in it. But if you're well rested, you're going to have more energy. You're going to exercise more. You're going to be generally healthier. So
Some people
it kind of goes
snorers.
full. And some people just are.
I would really struggle with a snorer. I'm a light sleeper. Snoring would not work for me at all. I'm very lucky that my partner and I are compatible to sleep together, because I do sleep better with a partner. So I think maybe other people would find that as well. Like, I find myself much less anxious when I'm sleeping with somebody else. I feel like they're protecting me and keeping me safe. And he sleeps by the door, so the whole if we get broken into, you can be killed first concept is there. I'm by the window, so I can jump out first. We're all good.
So what was your thought? I mean, when me or Fran first said to you that we don't sleep in the same bed, what was your first reaction to that?
I don't know, really. Nothing you guys say surprises me, to be honest. I don't know, because I know you guys as a couple, you're such a solid couple and you communicate so well together. So I know that there would have been a deep and intense thought process and sort of structured, this is why we're doing it. So it from my perspective, I was like, this won't be like we hate each other, we're sleeping in different rooms. It would be like we've done the research, we've done this, which is exactly what it'd be like in my relationship.
Giving us more credit than we actually deserve, I think, in that respect. But something I looked up about this, and the Sleep Foundation was saying that lower sleep's actually related to dysfunction sexually in both men and women.
Yeah.
So it does actually sort of all correlate that, if you don't click in a sleep sense, that actually you might not be clicking in a sexual sense as well.
Yeah.
Just as a result of the sleep, rather than actually as a result of your relationship not working at all.
Absolutely. So despite us sleeping better when we aren't with partners, as the studies show, in my case and in many people's cases, our social brain will prioritise our need for closeness and security at night over our sleep, our quality of sleep, our depth of sleep. It's that social brain that's leading people like me to say, no, I absolutely couldn't sleep separately, to the point where me and my partner, it's quite a special time. In previous relationships, I didn't have the same setup. I worked very different shifts to my previous relationships. And now we sort of go to bed at the same time, and I'm quite hot on that, because it's sort of our downtime together. I sit and read my book and he listens to his podcasts, and we have a little, intimate moment of not necessarily anything sexual, but just feeling that level of intimacy. But you guys have this with your little bedtime ritual, I guess, in the same sense. And maybe do you spend some time together in a room before you go to bed as well?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, definitely. And there's a bit of a sort of decompression of the day before we go to bed as part of our ritual.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a really good little setup. So healthy sleep has the power to strengthen our relationships, which is sort of what we've discussed, while sleepless nights can lead to relationship harm. So here's a study that says, when we studied sleep and relationship quality in a group of heterosexual couples, both during the night and during the day, we found that when our male subjects slept worse, they reported that their relationship quality suffered the next day. But for women, it was all about the relationship. On days when our female subjects were not so happy about their relationship, both her sleep and her husband's sleep suffered that night. I like that because it just shows that
I
even
took it
if
out
we
on you.
don't say anything, it rubs off, doesn't it?
It does.
The
It definitely
the
does.
key when you go to bed, though, is your subconscious is still there. And if you're worried, if you're stressed, if you're mad, if you're angry, it'll affect your sleep. And if you're sleeping in the same bed as someone else, naturally it will affect theirs. So if you're going to bed, I mean, I know you certainly did, thinking back, you were sort of pre-angry before we'd even got in bed. And then I was pre-tense about it before we even got to go into bed. So that makes a lot of sense, definitely.
It also makes sense because you're saying with men it affects them more physically because testosterone is produced mostly when you're asleep. So if you're not getting enough sleep, then it's reducing your testosterone level, which can reduce the number of erections, and it can also reduce your sperm count.
Yeah.
So it's like physically massively impactful.
Yeah, there's so many benefits to sleep and so many scary negatives of not sleeping properly. I've just finished reading Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker, which was terrifying, knowing about the effects of sleep, not just on our relationships, but on our general health. The links to Alzheimer's, cancer, heart disease, depression, ADHD, autism. It's absolutely unreal, the amounts of links it has. And he's sort of a big pioneer in that side of things, getting sort of school wake-up times changed and stuff. So it's clear that this is a sector that I think probably needs a little bit more education for people in general, and how important it is to prioritise sleep, even if, as the studies say, our social brains are tempted to ignore that anyway. So research shows that when you're well rested, you're a better communicator, happier, more empathetic, more attractive, and funnier, all important attributes in developing and sustaining strong relationships. So I guess that's suggesting that if you're in an early relationship and your sleep is shit, then you're in trouble.
Yeah.
But how to introduce that conversation to an early relationship would be quite a challenge, I think. Hi, I know we've just met and we're being intimate, but I'm going to sleep in a separate room to you.
Yeah, no, I think you probably do need to establish a bit of a relationship first before you sort of jump in with that.
Yeah.
I think we were quite far into our relationship, even though we were probably 2 or 3 years in by that point.
I think we sort of looked into it, though.
Mm.
We just did it sort of through necessity,
Yeah.
not through education. And
Yeah.
it's probably not until 12, 18 months ago where we actually realised that, scientifically, actually, this is the right thing to do. We just kind of looked into it, tried it through chance, and it worked for us.
Yeah.
On both, from a science point of view, but also emotionally as well, and in the confines of our relationship, it worked for the better. And it wouldn't work for everyone else.
We got more, as our communication got better, we got more okay with it as well.
Yeah.
I think that communication bit was probably the key, and we didn't have an awful lot of that to start off with. But then we didn't need to because we were on different schedules.
But like you said earlier, if you'd had the education prior to that resent building up in the first place, then you would have felt way more okay about it. It would have been way less like taboo. And you've been like, even if it's not like a permanent thing, be more like, should we trial sleeping in separate rooms for a week? Like from a non-resentful, our relationship's dying point of view, and more in a, let's see if it makes it,
Doing it
if
calmly.
it's beneficial. Just like people do with sort of diets and detoxes and things like that. Not that I'm promoting any of those, but it's like having a little sleep diet, but in the other way.
I think that's the biggest leap for people to make, though, isn't it? That it's not an indication that there's a problem.
Yeah.
It's actually, let's
Preempting
improve our life. Let's improve our relationship by doing that.
Let's focus on our individual welfare, which will then lead to us promoting our joint welfare as a couple.
The great thing is that I think sleep as a tool is talked about so much more now. And I think there's more and more views on it. There's much more coverage in the media about the importance of it. And hopefully, that will start to embed with people, and they'll realise that it is something to consider.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we still live in a culture where many people view sleep deprivation as a badge of honour, and will sort of come in, I only got 5 hours sleep last night, need my coffee this morning. And that, I think, is such an unhealthy, toxic attitude.
It's a ridiculous attitude.
Yeah.
Because there also, there'll be people who think that it's okay to be sleep deprived and that's a badge of honour, but then they'll go on about how they need to be healthy and how much time they spend in the gym and things. And that is as important as the time in the gym is the recovery, if not more important in many ways. And just to cut that out is like, well, you're sort of wasting your time in the gym. And, you know, mentally as well. Yeah. Just cutting out all the stuff, all the prep work. I mean, you don't go to an interview without knowing who's interviewing you. You know, it's that kind of just simple groundwork that you're cutting out by just not sleeping.
And it's like, it's probably easy for us to think, oh, you know, got 5 hours sleep last night, but, you know, I'll try and catch up tonight. But it doesn't work like that in the sleep world. And in fact, you know, from Matt Walker's book, he talks about how, you know, even a few days of deprived sleep, 6 hours, even have 6 hours for 3 nights in a row, is seriously impactful on your physical health, your how you act, how you appear, your cognitive sort of strength and resilience. Like, it just affects everything. And yet we still have this culture that's like, oh yeah, I'm such a legend.
Well, until we started doing this sleep, the sort of optimizing it, I didn't realise. I thought that getting up and feeling like, oh God, a train's hit me sort of feeling. Yeah. I thought that was just being an adult. And I didn't realise that, no, that's just not being an optimal adult.
Yeah.
And that actually it is possible to get up and feel really good and get up earlier. I mean, we now get up 2 hours earlier than we used to get up and feel better as a result of it.
Yeah.
As a result of everything that we've done. We go to bed earlier, we get better sleep, but we get less sleep. But it's exactly where it should be, when it should be, and how it should be. And that suddenly just opens up the doorway to the rest of life. And I think that's where certainly the sexual side of it just really sort of made us surprised, really. I think that it could have had so much effect.
I think it's hard as adults as well to get yourself to bed earlier, and not just because of like the discipline side, but because there's so much to do.
Yeah.
Like, we get home from work, like a lot of people get home from work sort of 6:30, and it's like, oh, I've got to eat before then and let my food settle and put the kids to bed and this, that and the other. And then prioritising your own sleep sort of becomes something on the back burner a little bit, I think. So I can understand where it is a challenge. And I'm really fortunate that it's something that I've always sort of been so strict on. Like, I will cancel plans to prioritise my sleep.
We're the same. We used to be busy till 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, sometimes later, just trying to get things done. And then as we learned about how we needed to improve our behaviours and our habits around sleep, we got to the point where we just sort of drew a line and said, no, at that time, we're stopping. And if things don't get done, they don't get done.
Yeah.
And what we found is within a few days, within a week or so, we were sleeping better, we felt better, we had more energy, we got more done in the day, and then we didn't need to be faffing about late in the evening. And then that has a knock-on effect with the sex life as well, where there's more time, there's more energy, we feel better, we're not feeling as antagonised by the other, we're more likely to have sex.
Yeah.
But I always thought I was a night owl. I always thought that I was better at night. And we did a DNA test that said, no, actually, neither of us is a night owl. We're both morning larks. We're both better in the morning. And that if we go to bed much earlier and get up much earlier, we get so much more done. And I've suddenly realised that actually, no, my best time is like first thing in the morning. And that has a knock-on the sex side of it as well. Apparently, the best time for us to have sex is about lunchtime.
Yeah.
Which doesn't really work. Often
Practicality point of view.
Yeah.
Well, no, because that would be now.
Yeah. You know, let's just down tools and off we go sort of thing. Doesn't really work that often. But it does show, like, where your desire is more likely to peak. And so that probably, if you're making time for each other in that sort of period, if you're less up for it, I think it's easier to sort of switch on earlier on instead of being like, mentally we were like, no, we'll wait till sort of 9, 10 o'clock at night. But mentally we're done for the day. And so we were just sort of battling against our bodies.
Yeah.
But that's just another thing that you learn, isn't it? Sex is something to do at night time when you go to bed.
Yeah, who gives you these rules?
They're just ingrained, aren't they? Interestingly, there is actually very little systematic research on how sleeping apart affects couples' relationship quality or intimacy. So I think a lot of, I guess they just haven't been bothered to do studies on it, but a lot of the stuff you're going to get in terms of how good it is would be anecdotal. Have you met anybody else who has sleeping patterns like this, other than obviously?
I know one
Queen.
couple who sleep separately, and they say it's brilliant.
Yeah.
But they're the only people so far. It's not a common
Anecdotally,
thing.
I've only spoken to friends that sleep in the same bed,
Mm.
and they're telling me how tired they are. And they've got kids as well, which comes part of that equation, and young kids that wake them up. But I'm listening to it and thinking, if you slept separately, you'd probably be so much better. But that wasn't a conversation they wanted to.
Yeah. To be fair, the only time I've been woken up in my relationship by my partner, because I'm such a light sleeper, like the wind will wake me up, but he's like dead asleep. It's wonderful. Is when he got bitten by a spider in the night, which was just hilarious because we were wondering what was going on. But spiders, British household spiders do bite.
I know that.
Yeah, and you once got bitten.
I once got bitten in a very intimate area,
Oh.
which we realised later could only have been a spider bite.
Massive holes.
Yeah, it wasn't great.
Like, we weren't in the same. We hadn't done anything. We weren't in the same bed or anything. Came in and was like, "What is all that
I
blood?
was like, there was blood all over the.
Like, what has
Somewhere.
happened?"
Yeah,
Violent, these spiders.
awful.
Anyway, I think we've covered as much as we can today. There was a really good episode talking about that. So thanks so much to everybody who's listened. We'd love if you could give us a review on any of the podcast platforms. Check us out on our social media. We've got Instagram, we've got TikTok, and we've got some blogs going up on our website and the newsletter as well. So thanks so much, and hope to see you again soon.
Sex.
It's not that deep.